Welcome to Mindfully Integrative Podcast with your host, Dr. Damaris G. Mindfully Integrative is a podcast discussing ways toward mindfully incorporating integrative health into our lives. This podcast will have informative resources, fun topics, interviews, and discussions relatable for today with a true mindful perspective in a mind-body holistic life approach.
This is Integrated Family Nurse Practitioner, Dr. Damaris Maria Grossman. And today we're just talking about what it exactly means to be optimal and well. What is optimal wellness? Now, when I talk about that, and I talk about the different people that come on to this podcast that have achieved optimal wellness or gotten close to optimal wellness or have shown signs in that direction, that actually encompasses many things. So there's like two kind of perspectives and parts of this. So you're on either the illness side or you're on the wellness side. And this actually has been first back in research of optimal wellness can be discussed in the research all the way back into like the 1970s and what's the meaning of it and what do they defy it and such. I say through and from what I have learned in the integrative health space that optimal wellness kind of composes of 12 points. And you don't just have one part. It isn't just the physical body. And it's encompassing of whole health. And with that, it really means these 12 components. And to be that, you have to be in a balance. So the 12 points of wellness, I'll first name them, and then we'll go into further discussion. So the first is your physical health, embodying lifestyle management. The second is nutrition. The third is water hydration. The fourth is sleep goals, sleep hygiene. The fifth is stress transformation. I never say stress management. I always say you're transforming stress because it's not always a negative. The body has stress response for good things. Financial health, quality connections, spiritual health, body love, sexual health, environmental health, genetics, how we were born, what's our purpose and life goals, and how do we grow from all of this? So let's get back to what everyone thinks most of our wellness has to do with is our physical health. Are we overweight, underweight, lifestyle management? And what does this kind of entail? You know, people think that they know and they describe it and say, this is what, if I'm fat or skinny. So overall, for exercise, it is recommended you have about 20 minutes of walking every day or some sort of activity, even if it's gentle movement, something. Some people may need more strenuous things like weightlifting. Other people will do walking. Other people, depending upon where they are in walks of life, but some sort of movement. Sedentary lifestyle can really cause a lot of adiposity. Adiposity is adipose tissue that is increased within the body, which then causes obesity. And that's increased fat consumption. They call it the visceral adipose tissue. That is what is our main issues with obesity and cardiac disease. So the more we have it, the more we suffer, right? The more we pack the fat, the more there's issues. Now, initially, you can look into your body and see a BMI index. And a BMI index is your body mass index. And that kind of uses your height and your weight. And it will give you I'll put in the show notes a calculator of, what would be the average. There's normal, there's underweight, there's normal, there's healthy, overweight, and then there's excessively obese. So you really are trying to keep in the range of below 25%. But in addition to that, there's other components that you want to look for when you're talking about body mass index and how to be healthy. So you're going to calculate a waist and hips circumference, and you do that by, measuring your hips, measuring your waist first, and then dividing out the circumference of your hips. And you're first going to look at your waist by the 10th rib and wrap that around. It's not necessarily your belly button. And then you're also going to do your hip circumference, and that is right around the hip bone, and you would measure around that. When you divide it out, it should be below 0.8, give or take. It depends upon men and women. They do vary. Same thing with your body mass index. Your numbers should be below 25, but I'll put a picture in there of from the Mayo Clinic that, the numbers do vary depending upon your age and women. Well, it's mostly women versus men. Now, why are these partial important? That is one aspect. In addition to these, I would also add in your waist, or your waist number, and it should be below 35. And if you're in the Pacific Asian category, it should be below 31. And that means it's like in your belly area. Do you notice when you look down and you're not pregnant, do you have a big belly? Or do you have a beer belly? Or they call it the donut belly, the carb belly. Is it protruding more? And if you measure your waist and it is over the 35 range, you are starting to have that visceral adipose tissue that is a problem. So you can be a skinny person and still have a little bit of the belly there. And that still means that things are a precursor, or you're kind of going into the direction of not having full optimal health. So in this aspect with physical health, you do want to maintain a good body mass index, your hip and waist ratio, and in addition, your circular body area. What is it? Now, there's also individuals that myself, I'm very hip heavy. Even hip heavy and butt heavy, there's still adipose tissue and muscle there that is accumulated, that still needs to be exercised out and worked out and released from the body. And that does take time, but that still is, they call that almost a pre or a pear shape individual. But those are still factors that can be part of the diobesity problems and other cardiac and other issues. In addition to being overweight and having the visceral fat, you also can have lung health issues. So lung health in this scenario, we talk about it is because you're obstructing your breathing when you're a little bit more overweight. Your body has more kind of looser, and you may have obstructive apnea issues. And even if you're not in that category, you still may have some obstruction that may decrease your oxygen levels when you're sleeping. So that in itself also affects your physical health. In addition to that, it affects your brain health, because if you're not getting enough oxygen, you're not helping your brain. Everything is interconnected. So when you listen to me or hear me on this podcast or watch me on a YouTube channel, I will always be talking about wellness and our body as it's a whole encompassing thing. One thing will affect another thing, will affect another thing. When you have an overweight or obese individual, or one of these factors are off, there is still kind of a precursor to then other things. It could be a precursor to sleep apnea, it could be a precursor to a dementia or brain fog. So there is many of things that kind of cascade together, because it's not one system and another system. So the second part that we're going to go into today is talking about nutrition. Now, in this podcast, I'm not going into all aspects of nutrition, but we're going to kind of just briefly discuss nutrition and kind of where, when I look at an individual and I look at a client, and there's things that are coming up, what would I look for? So initially, most people are nutrient deficient. And what that means is that they have the basic nutrients that individuals would need is dietary fiber, potassium, choline, magnesium, calcium, vitamin A, D, E, C, zinc, selenium, folate, and B12. Now, just because an individual may be low on these, sometimes people think, oh, well, if I just take one vitamin, I'll be okay. That is not necessarily true. Most individuals are actually very deficient in this area. In addition to that, with micronutrients, you then have to look into the microbiome. The microbiome is our gut. Our gut is our third immune system. So it's connected, the brain, the body, the gut. We are, all together. And in the microbiome, and in that, you have it's prebiotic, vegetables, probiotics. Now, when I talk about probiotics for someone, I address, there's women's probiotics, there's infant. So there's infant, there's child, there's women and men. And there are an array of probiotics available on the market. But at a minimum, you want to have at least 5 to 6 strains. It has to be at least 10 billion. The more, the merrier. And there are some specific research-based like lactobacillus. But in addition, there are specific pre and probiotics, well, specifically probiotics that are used for women specifically. So you would like to, when I recommend women certain probiotics, I say, please get the women's health probiotic. Make sure it's over 10 billion in strain and at least 5. Same thing for men. Now, prebiotics are the fibrous foods like vegetables and crucifers like collard greens and broccoli. Now, in addition to that, you've got phytonutrients. And phytonutrients are these chemical compounds in plant-based vegetables like beans and whole grains and quinoa. And they will help also increase your body's nutrient levels. Now, ways to have a nutrient-dense life is not just by supplements and not just by powders. You put, what you eat. What you eat and consume is part of that. So what you're doing there is you're having Mediterranean diet. That's usually a lot of fish, olive oil, a little bit of olive oil, some salmon, some grilled chicken, very light salads, and just clean, very clean, real foods, minimum gluten, minimum dairy, minimum soy products. You're eating more whole, more full. Now, when you start avoiding the processed foods and the processed sugars and the excess, you will notice your body will start to feel better. So this is part of the nutritional aspect, but how do you do that? You help with meal prep. You do things so you're not tired, and you try to prep low glycemic foods. You try to find heart healthy things. And let me tell you, your body and your wallet will thank you. It's not as hard as you think. It just takes a little bit of prep. So number 3, we're talking about water hydration. So what exactly does that mean? So what that means is imagine your body weight and half your body weight in ounces of water. So example, you're 150 pounds and divide that by 2. So that would be about 75 ounces of water. So when I drink water, I tell everybody I do a gallon water and I bring it with me and I try to drink that throughout the day. I have a big bottle so that I remind myself I haven't drank enough. I need to drink. And in addition to that, so sometimes it gets boring, right? You have these, you drink water because what happens is your body loses and gains water, right? So you want to have about half the body weight because you have about 70% of your body's made up of just water alone. And it really needs it to kind of lubricate and move and circulate and get those nutrients around. And without the water, we are doomed. You can't have food or water without living. To make it easier, I recommend some electrolyte filled powder kind of drinks or things that you can just add to the water that may help flavor it a little bit better. So it's not as boring and you're kind of like, okay, I could drink that. The fourth one for today I would recommend in this wellness realm is called sleep goals. So, what does that consist of? So, sleep goals for some people, it varies, right? Depending upon what your work schedule is, depending upon if you have kids and you're up late or you're up early or, your work schedule is night or day. Sleep hygiene overall really means trying to get about 7 to 9 hours of sleep, quality sleep. No, quality sleep means making your environment the best it can be so that you can have the most optimal amount of rest. Now, techniques of that is lowering the lights, less TV, just sleep and rest. And I will go over each of these points of wellness in more detail in further podcasts. Number 5, stress transformation. So I call it stress transformation because we are not doomed to have stress. Stress helps us. The body's natural defense is the fight or flight. We need to protect ourselves. But what happens is we are sometimes in this constant overdrive, and the body's adrenals become turned on and they don't shut off. With me in my life, I've had severe trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder from the military, and my adrenals were fired all the time, and I didn't know how to turn it off. And I always felt constantly anxiety-driven and stressed. And I thought, what do I do? I had to learn ways to change that pattern. And it was tough at first, but I had to find mindfulness, meditation, yoga, movement, breath work. And I have to tell you, they work. They're daily practices, work in progress, but you put the work in and the time and things make change. It helps with your depression. You might need exercise. If you have anxiety, you might need relaxation. If you need time for focus, you need focus training. If you have hyperactivity, you may need a combination. If you go out and ground yourself in nature, if you find yourself doing gentle movements, there's an array of things. And I will go over this in another podcast and videos on many aspects of stress management. I do many techniques and many ways to discuss that. So number 6, financial health. What does financial health mean? So financial health means living within your means, understanding that you really don't need as much as we think we need. What can you do without? What does your family really need? When you look at, they call it the Maslow hierarchy needs. We have shelter, you've got food, you're providing for your family. A lot of things in our life are actually ancillary, extra. And when they found out through research, we only need X amount of dollars to be happy. And when you really find most people overspend or compensate for emotional needs with shopping or providing for their family in excess. And it's tough. We understand, like, life brings up things and you need to buy for your family, and that's okay. But make sure that you take some time to see what really makes you happy and what your family and you need to be successful. Save that extra, $10 to put in savings and other ways to invest so that you can live a more quality life long term. I learned a lot when my husband, he was very good in financial health, and he taught me a lot of tricks on being better with my overall mindset. And then also I traveled across country and I lived in a van for a few months, and I really kind of got a perception of what is really necessary and what I do not need. And I really kind of got like an eye opener for myself of there's not much that I need. I remember when I was back in the military, I didn't need much. I had like a little corner cubby and, that was it. And my little rack and bed, they call it rack back then. And it was like minimal. And for some reason, with consumption, we consume, and we don't think about how we need to save or invest more in our life and things, more experiences and less spending. Number 7, quality connections. So that has, again, to do with your family or your friends, and how are you connecting with others? Are you really connecting with social media nowadays? Are we really taking the time to be there for others? or we just kind of posting saying, hi, how's it going? People really need to engage. And even in this time of Zoom, are you giving yourself that moment? Please take that time.
Thank you for listening to the Mindfully Integrative Show with Dr. Damaris Maria Grossman, family nurse practitioner. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not the substitute for professional medical advice, diagnose, or treat. Always consult your healthcare provider before making changes to your healthcare routine. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you enjoyed our show, please support us by leaving a mindful review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. Interested in being a guest or more information? Email us at info@mindfullyintegrative.com. For resources mentioned in the show, visit our website at www.mindfullyintegrative.com. You can also connect mindfully with Dr. Damaris on her social media links found on the site. May your strength and peace guide you to find a mindful way every day. Namaste.